Hey, it's Brandon Crane, the original Ben Hanscom from the Stephen King's It miniseries, and you're listening to Without Your Head.
Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal, and I'm joined by Ben Heller, the young Stanley of the 1990 miniseries Stephen King's It. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Neal. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate that.
I really appreciate you coming on. I was always a huge fan of the miniseries, of the book, of the new movie too. I always not just because I've had a lot of the people who played the kids, but that was always my favorite part of the story, and I thought all you guys did a great job in the miniseries.
Oh, thank you. That's really cool. I really appreciate that. I really enjoyed all the kids' performances as well, and of course the adults, but definitely felt that stronger connection to all the actors that I was working with.
Yeah. So how did you get the role originally?
So I was living in Vancouver, Canada at the time, and just doing a lot of extra work on a lot of the TV shows that were being filmed up there, and managed to get an audition for it. It was my very first audition, and it just kind of went from there. Went to the first call, got called back. I think it was a few weeks later, and then a few weeks later got another call back, and then maybe like several weeks later got notified that I got the part. So it was kind of a long wait in between, but it was a great experience, and I was really surprised when I got the news.
Yeah, and since it was your first one, you really had nothing to compare it to. Like, if this was normal for it to be this long or unusual or.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I had no idea. But boy, what an amazing experience it all was.
Yeah. Now, did you audition specifically for Stanley or just for any of the roles in it, any of the kids?
For the most part, just Stan. But at one point, I think they did have me read some sides for Eddie during the second callback, and then to the third, or then the third callback was for, or the third audition was just for Stan.
Mm-hmm. Did they give you any advice, like they were looking for something specific for Stan? They liked something you did, maybe you can improve on something, or was there any guidelines at all?
I don't really remember any kind of direction along those lines particularly. I do remember that when I first read the sides for the director and the casting director, producers, and so on. They did have some direction to say, hey, can you do this a little bit different? I don't remember specifically what it was, but I just did what they told me to do, and it worked out.
Yeah. Now, were you familiar with the book?
A little bit, not too much. I actually wanted to immediately read it when I found out that I was getting this audition. But at the time, my agent said, maybe just hold off because, I suppose she was concerned that it might influence me in some way that could work against me in terms of, how the script was written.
Mm-hmm. I guess in case if it was different.
Wait.
So
Right.
When did you read it? Was it like, did you read it after you knew you had the role, or did you read it after you did the movie miniseries?
Yeah, after, and this is going to sound awful, but I never finished it. So
well, it is very long.
And it is, and it's been on my shelf, multiple copies for a lot of years, and interestingly to me, after I saw the remake, I was like much more compelled to read the book. So it's in my queue now.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that, because I always wonder, like, when you watch a movie you've been in, do you see it for the movie it is, or do you kind of see it for the experience and the memories that you had making it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Boy, I'm not sure how. I mean, and forgive me because it's been so long. So I'm thinking way back. But I think at the time I was really just mostly as far as watching the finished product. I was watching it to a little bit for remembering, what was going on during the times that we were filming, but also, really wanting to see the complete story. I had a copy of the script and I had read the large majority of it, but there were some parts that I don't think I did read. And, even, during filming, and you would see kind of the dailies that would come through, you would see different scenes. I really had no sense of how everything was going to come together. So I was really anxious to see that.
Yeah. So when you do see the finished project, what did you think of it?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, I thought that everybody did a really amazing job, and I think that there were certain scenes, I think maybe towards the end, that caught me off guard a little bit. I didn't realize how big a part that it would be as far as manifesting as the spider in the end. That I didn't really have a good sense for. So that was a little bit of a like I say, just kind of caught me off guard a bit, but not in a bad way. I was used to kind of it being mostly
the clown,
Pennywise, and the clown, and so. But I knew, of course, that he took other forms as well.
Are you surprised? I don't know how much you knew of that at the time, because there wasn't the internet, so I don't know how you would know this, but a lot of people had a problem with the ending about the spider. Are you surprised by that at all? They seemed like it was kind of a letdown.
No, I'm not surprised, and definitely have heard that over the years. The comments, a lot of comments that people will make kind of center around, they really loved it, everything was great, and then the spider part kind of took them out of it a little bit.
Yeah, I felt the same way the first time I saw it, but I watched it again for doing the interviews, and I've seen it before. Since I saw it the first time, and after the first viewing of it, it never bothers me. I guess part of it is when you watch it for the first time, you don't know what to expect, and it's a big spider. But after that, it just it's never bothered me watching it, on repeat viewings.
Yeah, same. I sort of grew immune to that as well. Over time.
Yeah. If you ever do read the book, it's almost I don't know how you film what Pennywise is, because in the book it's kind of like the whatever is scariest to you. It's kind of just like it's manifested fear. So it's almost like you can't film what it is, because then that's why it does work so well in the book, because it's up to your imagination, and everyone would imagine something different.
Absolutely, that makes perfect sense, and what a great I guess villain to be, if you can just be anything that anybody is scared of.
Yeah. So we'll go back and forth between the movies, the new one and the miniseries you were in. But you did mention it. What was it about watching the new one, the remake, that made you want to now read the book?
Well, I think it was mostly just the fact that the stories were told, differently, I thought. I mean, maybe not at the core, but just, across the different characters. It felt to me like probably different elements of the book are represented in the new film that were not in the original. And so I thought, now is a good time to really read that book and understand where everything kind of came from, and sort of think a little bit more about the differences between the original and the updated version. Yeah.
So what did you think of the new movie?
Oh, I really liked it. I mean, the kids, the actors were great. They were amazing. One thing that stood out for me that I kind of surprised me was how much I laughed during the updated one. The updated Eddie character, just had some really great lines that made me laugh. So that kind of what surprised me. But I mean, it was just so interesting to see how different the adaptation was, and the updated Pennywise was just so frightening and gruesome, and that was another reason why I think I wanted to go ahead and pick up the book too, to have a different understanding of how Pennywise is represented in the book versus the two films.
Yeah. And I said this before, not just because you're here, and maybe you have a preference for Pennywise since you're in the one, but I like both versions of Pennywise. I think it's a different take on the same character. How would you compare the two?
Boy, honestly, I think it's hard to make a really direct comparison for me, just because, I think that for Tim Curry's portrayal, there was perhaps not as much special effects tied to that as the updated Pennywise, which is not a bad or good thing, in itself, but just different. So I think that for me, Tim Curry's portrayal was a little bit more of a psychological fear that I felt, whereas the Bill Skarsgård portrayal made me remember how scary like Jason and Freddy and characters like that were to me when I was a kid. And but still, I mean, it's hard to pull away from the experience of being there on set with Tim Curry. I feel really close to that.
Yeah. And your character has for the kids has, I think, more interaction with Pennywise than anybody else, which plays into what happens to Stan's reaction when he's adult about coming back. So, what was it like, working with Pennywise, with Tim Curry?
Oh, I mean, he was amazing, just so down to earth and genuine and nice. And, I was a complete newcomer to the business and to a set like this. And so he was really gracious and helped me understand some things that I was just learning, sort of on the job training, let's say. And so if I had questions when I was, working with him, or things would come up and I wouldn't know what these terms are necessarily that are being expressed by the director or PAs or whatever, I could ask him and he would tell me, and then he would tell me something else kind of funny sometimes about it as well, which made me feel at ease, and so I'm just so grateful for that.
Yeah. So I'd ask some of the other guys. So he wasn't anybody who didn't want you to see him out of character, but along those lines, though, is it? I know you're an actor, so maybe it shouldn't be hard. But is it hard at all to play that you're scared of him when you know that he's a nice guy?
Man, I think he made it easy to be genuinely scared while the camera was rolling or while we were rehearsing, because he was so just effective in that way. And I do remember some of the scenes that I filmed with him being the most, I'm trying to figure out the right words to say this, but just being the most in character with him, meaning that, when the director said cut, there were times when it definitely took a moment to come out of it, because those scenes were just so intense. And so I really remember feeling that versus lighter, happier scenes that we were shooting, where it was like, director says cut, you're kind of out of character. I was kind of out of character right away. Yeah. Whereas, with Pennywise and some of those scenes in the sewer, it took an extra moment to do that. So, and that's, I think, just part of acting, part of the emotion that comes with that.
Yeah. So when you're in the sewer, like, is that a set? or is that I would assume it's an actual sewer? But where are you when you're filming in the sewer?
Oh, so yeah, the large majority of that was a set. There were some. I mean, the entire portion where all the losers are sort of fighting Pennywise in the end. That was all a soundstage, and there was, I think, a couple of parts that took place in that same kind of setting, but that were actual location filmed. But yeah, all that sort of last part where the deadlights come over everybody and everything, that was all soundstage.
Yeah. So I noticed that you're a little bit older than most of the Losers Club. Did that affect did that affect anything? Like it seems like a few years doesn't really make a difference, but if you're like 13 or something at the time, 4 years can be a big difference. Did that affect anything when you're around those guys at the time?
It's a good question. I don't recall noticing anything in particular other than I suppose when filming was done for the day and we all kind of had our off time. I was probably out, doing things that a 17-year-old would be doing for a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
But other than that, no. On set, I don't really remember anything too distinctly different. I really felt like we all got along pretty well for the most part, and that we had a lot of fun. We were always kind of, when the cameras weren't rolling and when we could goof around, we took the opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone have a crush on Emily? Any of the other actors?
Oh man.
Or yourself? I don't
know. No, not I. I had a girlfriend at the time, and but I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. I don't. You're like around that age, and you're around somebody, and just curious.
Yeah.
So, what's like some of the hardest shots for you guys for you personally to film?
I think probably the one that comes to mind right now is when Stan was sort of having his moment when he was bird watching, and I think this scene was in part 2 of the miniseries, but it was one of my first days shooting, perhaps my first day, one of the first couple, and so I think that so the way that this was shot was, Stan enters this caretaker of the park's house, when he's out bird watching and he's sort of hearing this voice, which is of course the voice of Pennywise, and it sort of draws him over to this, caretaker's house. Let's say I can't think exactly what it was, but so. In the film, what you see is Stan, and then you also see this sort of monster, coming down the stairs towards him. Once he comes in the house, the door slams, shut behind him, and the only thing he can think of is to start, of course, spouting off bird names, because that's probably what makes him feel the most comfortable at the time. But there was no monster there when I was shooting. It was just the director with a little glove on his hand, and so that was sort of my eye line, and that was the thing I needed to be afraid of. And so yeah, that was probably one of the hardest scenes that I can think of right now. But it was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, when it branded on just a couple weeks ago, he had mentioned that like the director had him and John Ritter spend some time together so they can have like some similarities between the child and the adult version of that character. Did you have anything like that with Richard?
Yeah, we did. And that was really cool. And that's a memory I'll always, I think have very vividly, he had I remember sort of out of the blue getting a call from either his representation or perhaps it was him. I don't recall. But the direction was, hey, come down to this place, meet Richard Mazur. You guys need to talk. And so I did that. I went and met him at I think probably at the hotel he was staying at in Vancouver. And we talked for a little while, and like you said, there was some things that we needed to discuss about the character, to kind of figure out, how we could have some similar behaviors that people could easily see, in the film. And so this was actually a really big moment for me at the time as a brand new actor. And he had said, well, there's going to be a scene with this transition. What should we do? What kind of behavioral characteristics should we use to connect each other, And almost right away, that a thought came into my head about, sort of just gently grabbing on the ear. Mm-hmm. And he liked it. He loved it. He was like, that's great. That's perfect. That's what we're going to do. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe that just happened, because I don't know what I'm doing. So, but it worked. He liked it. It worked. And so I just always have felt fortunate that to sort of have that support from him, and the confidence that was going to work.
Yeah. Was there ever anything talked about with him and you or the director and you about, because your character has to really sell the fear when he's young, for the Stanley character when he's older, for him, committing suicide to make sense. So did they talk to you at all about, like, you have to show more fear than the other losers club? You know what I mean? For that whole kind of thing to really hit home and to make sense in the story. Mm-hmm. Was that ever discussed?
That was not. I don't think that was directly, sort of explicitly communicated to me by the director. But there was a dialogue coach on the set at all times. I'm trying to remember his name. He was really amazing guy. And he gave me a lot of coaching around that, and really specific coaching around, trying to act fearful. And so we definitely did. We spent a lot of time on that. We worked on that a lot. And I just took it as, part of the job. This is what I need to do. I'm being told, kind of given some coaching and some advice on tricks and things that I can do in that regard, and I just soaked it all up and did the best that I could. But I really like your question there, because I never really thought about it quite like that. And mm-hmm. You're totally right that it would have been really important for Stan to show that fear, such that people would understand why he did what he did as an adult.
Yeah, and not to spoil the second part of the new movie that comes out in a couple of years, but I did think they did a good job on the new one with Stan. There was some little subtle hints I noticed, like he was a little separated from the group and just stuff. I thought it was just like good foreshadowing of what will happen to Stan.
Yeah, no, I'm anxious to see how they play that out. I mean, obviously we have a sense of the general idea of what's going to happen, but how they format it and play it out, and I can't wait to see that.
Yeah. So what was that like, though, to see the new movie and see someone else playing, a character that you played?
I thought it was really cool. I think that Wyatt Olaf, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name exactly, but I thought he did a really great job, and it was cool to see how the character was portrayed a little bit differently. And of course it was updated, to an 80s setting, which I really liked, because, I grew up mostly in that era too. So, the clothes that he was wearing, those are things that I wore too. Right. When I was that age. And, but I really liked, how they kind of so the things that were fearful to him were different, and to me that painting on the wall that would have scared the crap out of me as a little
Yeah,
kid, for sure.
definitely. Yeah, it's I think the same way. At the same time, I did think a little bit, why would anyone even have that painting? But
Mhm.
it's Derry is a strange place where it's so it makes sense within the storyline of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, it was very creepy. I don't know if you read this or not, but speaking of the '80s, because I grew up in the '80s too, is
Mhm.
that they had thought about putting like Freddy Krueger in it, which makes
Mhm.
sense if you think about it. I think it's probably, in my opinion, best they didn't. But because the original story was about kids in the '50s, and stuff that scared them was like Universal monsters, and so stuff that would have scared kids in the '80s would have been, like the temporary monsters we think of, Leatherface and Jason and
Right.
Freddy. I don't
Yeah.
know if you read about that, and if you had any opinion to that.
No, I didn't. I didn't read about that. That's interesting. I mean, I could see how it would be worth entertaining that idea, because as you said, it was updated to a different time, and then the monsters were different. The villains and the horror was a little bit different. But yeah, in a way, I guess I would speculate that might take away from it a little bit, because
Yeah,
those
it
are
would.
their own horror films.
Yeah, because I think the Universal movies are so from another time, the '30s, that you don't really
Hmm.
think of temporary people aren't going to think of them as. But I think if you had something from the '80s in with Pennywise, it's almost like it's kind of like a meta kind of thing where it's almost like movies within movies. I don't know. It's just, I think it would be a
Hmm.
different vibe to it. Uh, were,
Yeah.
were were you a horror movie fan at the time, or now?
Um, yes and no. So I mean, when I was a little kid, movies like The Omen, or Poltergeist, or Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, things like this, they really frightened me a lot, and I don't know why. I would keep on watching them because I knew they were going to scare me, but
Uh,
I was definitely drawn to that, and I guess I got something out of it. And I think when I got a little bit older, that kind of horror didn't have the same effect on me. But other things like Blair Witch Project, for example,
mm,
definitely, freaked me out a little bit, because, for me, I do a lot of outdoor rec, a lot of camping, things like that,
mm,
and I have camped by myself at times before. So
uh-huh.
I always think about things like Blair Witch Project when I'm out there and it's dark and I hear things, in the trees, and so on. And so that has a little bit more effect on me now. But yeah, I would say I'm still a horror fan, but it's just a little bit different.
Yeah. Do you have any particular ones that stand out? I know you just named a few.
Um, Boy, I mean, I'm trying to think of the last horror film that I saw. That and boy,
That's probably
one
it.
that comes. Well,
Yeah.
that one, the most,
Yeah.
the recently
Uh,
updated one, yes. But prior to that, I think there were a couple of either Korean or Japanese horror films that I saw that I think ended up getting sort of American versions as well,
mhm.
like The Grudge, for example.
Yeah,
I'm
the
trying to
ring.
remember the yes, yeah, exactly. Those ones, for whatever reason, they feel a lot more realistic to me as
Mhm.
far as that goes. So I really liked those, but looking back on the past a little bit, like I say, one that comes to mind that really scared me as a kid was like Westworld, the original film.
Mm. It's a great
That
movie.
just had an impact on me when I
Mm.
was a little kid. The Omen also, the
Mhm.
original, Amityville Horror. Those films just, and I think still to this day, if I were to watch them, I might feel a little bit freaked out.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you watch the new Westworld TV show?
I have seen it. I've seen most of the first season, and so I'm looking forward to seeing the second season, which I think starts up any time now, or perhaps it already has.
Yeah,
I really liked it though. I mean, it's cool.
I liked it a lot too. Yeah, it was. I didn't know how the. Yeah, I loved it actually. I was. You got to watch the whole thing because I don't want to spoil it, but there's definitely some really big twists in it that I don't think you'll see coming. I'm not sure how they.
No, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they're going to do a
really
second season. Yeah, definitely.
The second season.
Yeah, I don't. It hasn't started yet. I think it might not start to 2018 or something, but I'm not really sure how they follow up. Yeah, I won't tell you where the story goes, but it's gonna. I'm not sure where it goes from where it ended. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the great things about, having that content as a series. You gotta kind of have to wait to see what's going to happen. And the first one was so good that it stands to reason that the second season should also be equally as good, if not better. Perhaps not, but hopefully not worse. That is.
Yeah. So, what made you want to become an actor?
Yeah. Well, I think that for me, before I had, so I'm originally from Vancouver, BC, but I moved into the States when I was young, like 5 or 6 years old, and so through, let's say, middle school into the early years of high school, I just really liked the idea of being somebody else, right? And for a short amount of time to see what that's like. And I don't think I really realized at the time how interesting that was to me. But it was just kind of a fun thing to do, something I had fun with, a lot of really cool people kind of in that community. And then for my junior year of high school, I moved back to Canada. And so up in Vancouver, there was a huge film scene going on there, movies and TVs and tons of stuff being filmed. So I thought, well, this is going to be, interesting. I can just kind of, get an agent and see what'll happen. I mean, if I figured while I'm doing these, these little sort of small acting things within my small circle in school and so on, this is maybe something I can explore a little bit more. And so I found out that, once I started doing a little bit of extra work, and that was happening on shows like 21 Jump Street and Wise Guy and Booker and all these kind of Stephen Cannell produced shows. And I just became really fascinated at everything that was going on set. A lot of people come on and they're like, oh, it's so boring. It's, there's a lot of waiting around. But for me, the waiting around was more about observing and paying attention and seeing all of the activity. And I was just really intrigued by that. That didn't necessarily have anything to do with acting, but I really liked that environment. And I continued to take acting classes and, paid for my acting classes and so on through this agency that I was with. And just was enjoying it. It wasn't actually, there wasn't anything specific that I can remember thinking, I want to be an actor, and everything that comes along with that. Just kind of felt connected to that, enjoyed it, and it was somewhat easy to pursue up there in Vancouver. And then, when this audition happened and that just sort of took on a life of its own, I just fell a little bit more into it. And a funny story that I can share with you that I've always sort of gotten a kick out of when I look back on it is that I ended up failing my junior year drama class because I couldn't I couldn't make the final test because I had to be on set for it, and my teacher failed me. So, but you know what? I wasn't actually that bummed about it because I felt like, perhaps I could have made up that assignment, but this other thing was much bigger. So
yeah, you should have just turned that in. Like, here you go.
All right. Yeah, exactly.
So, did you how long did you keep acting after you did it?
Let's see. I went down to Los Angeles, within a few months of that, first time living down in LA and now getting a whole new exposure to what that business is like. I remember at one point seeing Tommy Lee Wallace, the director of it, when I was doing some, I think like some audio dialogue replacement stuff down in LA. And he was asking me, hey, how's it going? Are you working? And I was like, nope, not working. Doing lots of auditions, not working. He's like, oh no, that's working. You're doing auditions, that's working. And I just, sort of took that to mean that it's part of the work to, become a successful actor. But to actually answer your question, really, I think that lasted for about a good 6 months that I was down there, doing auditions and getting really close to the roles that I was auditioning for. I think probably, anecdotally, maybe getting into about 80% of the calls I went on, I got pretty far into the process, into multiple callbacks, which was explained to me that when you're getting into callbacks and multiple callbacks, you're being recognized as somebody that has the talent to do the job, though you may not be the right actor for the job. So that gave me a little bit of comfort. But for whatever reason, even just coming down to, myself and one other person, I could never book those jobs. And these were big jobs, with A-list movie stars, perhaps bigger parts than I really should have been auditioning for with the experience that I had, but I was grateful to be there. So it was really after that I started studying acting with some various coaches and realizing, what I really liked about it. So I did a few other things, a little bit of theater, some independent film projects, and that lasted for several years. And then I just sort of, transitioned into, normal life, let's say. But what I just really enjoy the idea of, there's a great quote by an acting coach, a really famous acting coach who I wish I could have studied with, but there would have been no way to do that. A guy named Sandy Meisner. And one of the things that I remember reading about him saying is that acting is really just the study of people. And I've always been really interested in understanding people better through all different kinds of circumstances. And it took me many years to realize that was one of the big things that draws me into acting. So I don't think that I'll never act again, but when I have the time to pursue it a little bit more, whether hobby or to actually get jobs, I think that's going to be great, but it just doesn't really fit into my career right now.
Now, did you keep in touch with any of the actors after it, or did you guys kind of go your separate ways?
Yeah, for a little while. I think maybe for the first year or so, I had been in regular contact with Jonathan Brandis, and we spoke occasionally. And then I had a lot of contact with Seth Green and with Jared Blankard as well. And but probably within a couple years of that's just sort of faded away as we went our separate directions. So it's been quite a few years since I spoke with those two. And then Brandon and I reconnected maybe 10 years ago or so. I was living in LA working for the company that I still work for, and contacted him, was able to kind of find him online, and we reconnected, which was great. And then I think, maybe last spring, we finally reconnected again, and we've seen each other since then, and we've talked and stuff as well. And then I recently was able to visit with Adam Farazel and have dinner with him a few weeks ago as well. So it's been really cool to reconnect with everybody a little bit, having shared this really unique, interesting experience all those years ago.
Mm-hmm. Just like the story, 27 years later.
I know. Isn't that funny? Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And you said you cut the contact for a little bit with Jonathan. When did you hear about what happened to him, and what was that like to deal with?
Yeah, that was. I think it was day of the sort of announcement of his passing, and it just totally, like, I really caught me off guard on that, and I just felt like, I didn't know anybody who'd ever been in that situation before, and we hadn't spoken for so many years. I had no idea, what was going on in his life, and so I heard about it early in the morning. I took the rest of the day off just to think about it, and I just was really sad, and I really wished that I would have had a chance to, that I would have tried to keep in better contact with him over the years. Mm-hmm. Not that would have had any impact on anything, but just wish I would have, maintained that friendship a little bit more. And I remember he was so fun to work with, and he had a lot of experience, at the time as well. In fact, he was the first actor that I met, and he was the first actor that I worked with on the set of it. So he kind of, in a way, he took me under his wing a little bit for these first couple scenes to kind of help me get comfortable and familiar with, how things go on a movie set like this. And he had a really great family. His mom was really sweet. So I have really good memories of that entire experience, and I'm still sad about it,
Yeah. So, I saw that some of you guys are starting to do some conventions coming up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Though, what do you expect from that experience?
I'm not exactly sure what to expect, to be honest with you. I mean, I think that, to me, those opportunities, it's not something that I had ever considered or thought might occur, but it's really interesting to me. I'm anxious to see, what that's all about, because that's a world that I just don't have experience in. And I really appreciate that there's a huge fan base out there that, really is still very interested in the old film, and they still like it, and they're interested to see, the actors and where are they now, and so on. So I'm anxious to meet, some of the fans and see what it's like in that environment. I think, I'm so removed from that world and have been for so many years that I just feel like a normal person going into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really open to the experience. I'm curious to see, what I'll learn, and really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Do you think the success of the new It will bring, even though there's already a built-in fan base of the original one, do you think it'll add to that? Like, maybe people who haven't seen the old one will seek it out. Do you think it'll bring more attention to the original one?
I would think that there would be some additional attention to that. Yeah. I mean, I suspect that some of the younger kids that are really into the new film may be curious about, what the old one was like, and therefore, seek it out. So yeah, I feel like there could be some additional kind of fan base growth there. But yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, feels like maybe time will tell in some way.
Yeah. It seemed, well, after the original that you were in, it seemed like kind of the fear of clowns started to come about. And then this last year, it's just everywhere. There's tons of movies. It's on American Horror Story. And did you ever have a fear of clowns, or ever even think of that before you did it?
It's a little bit, and I'll give you an example. I don't think I was ever really, specifically afraid of clowns, but there was a scene. I think it was Poltergeist 2, maybe it was Poltergeist 1. Do you know the scene I'm talking about?
I think it's the first one. Yeah. It's got the clown in the room. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Like that definitely I remember as a kid seeing that and being like, oh my God, that could really happen.
Uh, yeah.
So it definitely freaked me out, but I was never, after that, I wasn't traumatized the way it feels like a lot of people have been.
Yeah. Yeah. Oddly enough, like, not to be a tough guy, I just watched horror movies as a kid, so not too many things like I would say like actually scared me. But anytime there was like action figures or like a doll, like and that one, that's it. It was the clown in the room and Poltergeist and that, because I always had a lot of toys, and so
Yeah.
that one always got to me too.
It got you too.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so if you don't want to read it, there's also audiobooks. You could listen to the audio version.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious to do that too, just because I think that, I mean, I'm definitely going to read it, myself, but to hear it sort of narrated by somebody else, I think would be really interesting as well. So I guess I'll have to pick that up.
Yeah. Now there are some odd things that happen in the book that did not happen in the miniseries, and I assume will not happen in the movie. Maybe I'll be really surprised, but I won't spoil those for you. But be prepared for some out there things, which maybe you've read online if you've if you ever ran into it. But there's definitely odd things.
Yeah, I do remember, back during filming, and I can't remember who it was that told me about these things, but I do remember hearing about certain things that definitely were not in the script for the original film, and so I'm aware of some of them. But yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of discovering what everything is. That wasn't in the original or the updated version.
Mm-hmm. When it first came out, the miniseries that you're in, how did that change your life at all? Did people then recognize you from that, or people in school? I don't know. Did you go to regular school? I don't know.
Yeah, I did. I went back to the same high school I had been going to for a few years, and yeah, I mean, it definitely. I think that some students maybe looked at me a little bit differently, and I definitely remember, some kids saying things like movie star, which I just like sort of, made me cringe a little bit because I didn't think about it that way at all. Yeah. But my really close friends, the people I had known for all these years, who I'm still good friends with and still see regularly, they didn't treat me any differently, which I really appreciated. And I don't really think outside of the neighborhood, so to speak, and even being down in LA for a while, there really wasn't a time that I can recall that somebody's like, hey, you're Stan from It, I mean, for whatever reason, I think maybe if I had the Boy Scout costume on, perhaps that would be different. But
right. I just imagine you always wearing the Boy Scout. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know, man. If only I could still fit into that thing.
Maybe you could get one it would be a good photo op for the convention.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, or maybe it just might be weird. I don't know, but
it might be. I know. It could go either way.
So, are you on social media for people to follow you?
A little bit. I have an Instagram account, but that's it. And so, I mean, I don't go by my real name. I kind of have, for all these years, sort of tried to be a little bit more, anonymous.
Sure.
And I had a Facebook account for a few years, and again, that I had that under an alias, but that's I just wasn't using it anymore. It wasn't the experience I was really looking for, from social media, and Instagram was the experience that I'm looking for. It works for me.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, fans can search out NWX. Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I'm saying this right.
All right.
NXSW 5000. I think that's what it is.
All right. What is that reference? What is that in reference to?
It was like a thing that came to mind, sort of. I think at the time I had South by Southwest in my head, and this is North by Southwest.
I see.
Is what that represents, and the 5,000 is just because I needed a number to go with it to make a unique identifier.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yes.
That's not your password for any kind of logins or anything either, is it?
No, definitely not. My password is 1990
yeah.
Ben Heller. No, I'm just kidding. No,
Yeah.
There's nothing like that.
I'll find out for sure here in a minute. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great time talking to you, and I hope to run into you at a convention.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to interview me. This has been great, and I've really had a nice time talking with you about it. The subject comes up from time to time. It's never really gone away, but it's kind of fun to relive some of those old memories and think back on it. I'm kind of a nostalgic person, so I really appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Cool. One other question, actually, since you said that. Has your view of the movie ever changed over time? Like you just said, now you like to talk about nostalgia, but was that always the case, or was there ever a time like you didn't want to talk about it?
No, I can't think of a time when I wasn't open to talk about it. I mean, in some regards, talking about it is you kind of have to draw it out of me a little bit because I don't necessarily, I sort of shy away from the attention, let's say, to a degree. Sure. It's just, I'm not always the most comfortable with that, but trying to become more comfortable these days with the attention that is on the old film.
Mm-hmm. No, very cool. Well, you can appreciate it.
Yeah, but I appreciate all that. Yeah.
Very cool. And I hope to talk to you again sometime.
Thank you, Neal.
You're very welcome. Thank you for doing it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Hey, this is Marlon Taylor, the young Mike Hanlon from Stephen King's It, and you are listening to Without Your Head.